Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Kyle Allison. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this week's topic as we cover the concepts related to global sourcing and global procurement. So, in any global business class, you touch on upon many different topics, but one topic that's really critical in business today is how products and raw materials are sourced all over the world. Global sourcing is at its all-time peak compared to other years, based on the fact that sourcing can be faster due to advances in technology, transportation has increased, and just the need for global partners to find with better the cost of materials and ease of doing business globally at times has really caused many companies in the United States and all over the world to find international partners to basically partner with and conduct their sourcing of material for products. But even though it's become a little bit more efficient with technology and at times faster to procure products, there are still challenges that we do face in today's global business environment when it comes to global sourcing. We're going to cover some of those issues as they are faced today and some of the predicted global dynamics that we're going to see coming up in the next few years. Before we get into the current issues and dynamics of the future of global sourcing, what is global sourcing in its core? Global sourcing is the practice of sourcing from the global market for goods and services across geopolitical boundaries. Global sourcing often aims to exploit global efficiencies in the delivery of a product or service. These efficiencies include low cost skilled labor, low cost raw material, and other economic factors like tax breaks and low trade tariffs. A large number of information technology projects and services, including IS applications and mobile apps and database services, are sourced globally to countries like Pakistan and India for more economical pricing. At the end of the day, global sourcing is all about cost, whether it's cost of resources such as investments in humans or employees or technology, and also at its core, low cost of raw materials. It is a lot cheaper for some countries to go out to other countries to find ways to save on the bottom line and reduce their resource costs when it comes to global sourcing. You can also consider this to be outsourcing, such as services as customer service, IT technical support. That's handled overseas a lot of the times when you are dealing with a foreign entity. Common examples of globally sourced products or services include labor-intensive manufactured products produced using low-cost Chinese labor, call center staff with low-cost English-speaking workers in the Philippines and Pakistan and India, and IT work performed by low-cost programmers in India and Pakistan and Eastern Europe. While these are examples of low-cost country sourcing, global sourcing is not limited to the low-cost countries. So again, these are just examples of some of the common global sourcing that takes place. But it doesn't mean that global sourcing is limited to only low-cost countries. Global sourcing can be happen in all types of countries in many different ways. The majority of companies today strive to harness the potential of global sourcing and minimizing cost. So at the end of the day, it's all about cost control, like I said. How do you impact your bottom line? Well, you find ways to cut costs, and sometimes that means doing global outsourcing or sourcing for your resources or raw material. Hence, it is commonly found that global sourcing initiatives and programs form an integral part of the strategic sourcing plan and procurement strategy of many multinational companies. In addition, global sourcing is often associated with a centralized procurement strategy for a multinational, wherein a central buying organization seeks economies of scale through corporate-wide standardization and benchmarking. A definition focused on the aspect of global sourcing is proactively integrating and coordinating common items and materials, processes, designs, technologies, and suppliers across the worldwide purchasing, engineering, and operating locations. What this means is that there is a generally core buying office for an organization that can be located in one particular country, but they partner with manufacturers and uh, suppliers all over the world to conduct ways to source their products. At times, it's bidding. Certain certain procurement companies in the United States will work with multiple countries and multiple manufacturers and negotiate the best cost of raw material, and usually the best cost wins. They usually have partnerships with a multiple different factories, and those partnerships are crucial. Those business relationships with foreign suppliers and manufacturers for any company trying to source globally is very important. The global sourcing of goods and services has advantages and disadvantages that go beyond low cost. So again, just because a company is trying to reduce costs and find the lowest cost of material or resources doesn't mean there are disadvantages to it. However, the advantages of global sourcing beyond low cost include learning how to do business in a market. So this helps understand how to work with a foreign market. Perhaps you're not implementing your product to that market, but you're working behind the scenes with a manufacturer of that market. You get a lot of intelligence, a lot of market research, just understanding the dynamics of what it means to do business in that foreign market. You're tapping into skills or resources unavailable domestically. Perhaps there's a skill set that you're lacking in your current host country, and you're finding that skill set in that workforce talent in that foreign country. Developing alternative supplier vendor sources to stimulate competition and increase total supply chain capacity. So by going to foreign or global outsourcing or sourcing, you're actually increasing your competitive landscape with the other companies that are trying to do business with those foreign entities. However, some of the disadvantages of global sourcing can include hidden costs associated with different cultures and time zones. So what that means is often you're going to not always understand the true cost of the material. There can be fees or things added to it that you don't know about. And it can be challenging to do business with other time zones, and that's international business in general. Exposure to financial and political risks in countries with often emerging economies. Increased risk of the loss of intellectual property. So you always have to be careful in international business in general, but especially global sourcing when you are sharing a lot of the in-depth operational and things that you're doing in your side of your company. If you're focused on getting low-cost raw materials, at times suppliers need to know what type of materials you need for what invention or product or service, and therefore they're going to know the tricks of the trade, the intelligence of your company, and that can be something very risky to do. And increased monitoring costs relative to domestic supply. For manufactured goods, some key disadvantages include long lead times, the risk of port shutdowns interrupting supply, and the difficulty of monitoring product quality. So it's very, very important to understand that if you give up the control of quality control and monitoring the quality of your product to another supplier overseas, you're going to have to trust that they're following the protocol set forth in your kind of agreement, that the quality of the product will be in the manner that you see fit for your current host country and also for your customers. An example of this could be food industry. A lot of food is sourced overseas and shipped internationally. Well, it's you're taking the word of the country that's producing it for you and sending it over that the food quality is good. It's hard to determine that though until the food gets here and you can observe it. So when you're a business discussing internally, what is the risk versus reward in global sourcing? Again, there are a lot of risks and there's also rewards to global sourcing and advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at that further. The advantages of sourcing offshore must be weighed against the associated risk. This may seem easy enough to accomplish, but there are some not so obvious costs that must be considered. There are costs such as shipping, freight, international tariffs. Perhaps there's some type of cost of material that you didn't understand when you negotiated that comes up later in your kind of business plan that you need to account for in your financial budget. A lot of things have to be considered when it comes to costs. It's not always bottom line costs, but it's also resource costs. Perhaps you didn't understand how much it was going to cost your company to actually ship the product, or vice versa. The amount of resources you need to get the products loaded and into your facilities in the United States, whatever country you live in. The decision process is complicated by additional uncertainty associated with offshore sourcing. So if there's an issue with if your shipment is running late, and again we talked about disadvantages, delays in lead time. Well, you are the company waiting on that material to arrive to your country from that supplier overseas, but you don't really have a lot of control about when they ship out that product, unless you're physically going to go out there yourself and make it happen. You're going to rely on your business partner, that facility, to actually ship out your product on time. You're at the mercy of that business partner and that facility, that manufacturer, to make sure it hits the right lead times. Lead times can be long if there's issues with weather, or if there are issues with political dynamics that are going on that shut down borders or ports of call, for shipments. You're at the mercy of that, and that's the decision making you can't control. The buying professional who is considering offshore sourcing must be prepared to fully analyze both the qualitative and quantitative factors. The qualitative factors, again, go back to quality, the value you're giving to your customers by, offshoring your products or services and getting them into your host country. And then quantitative, what are the costs associated? Is it worth the investment? Is the ROI completely there? To touch on more of the issues when it comes to global sourcing, here are several global risk issues. Some of these issues are distance, communication, time value of money, quality issues, pipeline problems, staffing issues, and competition. First, let's look at distance. The distance between buying and selling firm is significant in terms of time zones and physical location. Internet capabilities usually provide a partial solution. So there again, global sourcing has evolved because of the use of internet technology to communicate with your overseas partner much easier and faster. However, the face-to-face contact is preferred for some sensitive issues. For example, IBM requires the buyer to visit each supplier on a routine basis. Trips offshore and more expensive, and at times very consuming to one's time and schedule. So again, procurement is a valuable thing. It does save money, but if a very sensitive issue or a issue in the business occurs, it can cost money to travel overseas and internationally to see your business partner to handle a sensitive issue, and that also takes time in someone's schedule as well. So those kind of more personal risks you have to take and consider. Number two, communication. Communication can be described as the glue that holds together a sourcing relationship. Without effective communication, global transactions between buying and selling firms would be futile, in addition to being absolutely necessary for the completion of the transaction. Communication may also reduce or eliminate uncertainty with the relationship. Just as any business relationship, communication is key, especially in global sourcing. The buyer of the raw materials needs to have a solid relationship and effective communication with their supplier or manufacturer. If there is any kind of break or gap in that communication, or bad communication in general, somewhere the business is going to have an issue or fail because something was said incorrectly, the expectations on both sides were not clear. Therefore, communication is key, again, in any business setting, but especially in an international business when it comes to product sourcing. The next global risk is the time value of money. Since most offshore deals require the use of a letter of credit, the buying firm loses the use of funds when the letter is established. So, for example, suppose the shipments arrive 2 weeks after the letter of credit is established for a $1.5 million purchase. The buying bears a $60,000 opportunity cost expense. What this means is providing an upfront credit towards the product. A lot of the times overseas suppliers or manufacturers are only going to do business if they know you're worth the money. So there's usually a credit involved or some type of what you can consider down payment, as part of our deposit into the transaction. A lot of the times though, it's a letter of credit. So you're already losing money up front until you get your shipment in and are able to sell the products or create the products with your raw materials to get your money back and make sales. Number four, one of the biggest issues with sourcing is quality. The buying firm must spend the necessary time to correctly specify and articulate quality expectations. Again, it is the buying firm or the host country's job to establish with their foreign partner what quality means to them and their consumers and for the product or service that they are providing. Then there needs to be an evaluation to make sure that the sample is from a legitimate production run. A lot of the time, you'll get a sample from a foreign global business partner. You don't just go out and start buying loads of raw material or products. What you're going to do is want to get a sample, test it, evaluate it, or get multiple samples to ensure that there's consistency in the quality of the product or materials that they're providing. This can be done through prototypes or lab samples, and generally they might provide prototypes or lab samples, not full sample products. That does not count. You need to have true, effective, ready to go to market production samples from the manufacturer in order to evaluate its quality. The prototypes are just prototypes. They're just, examples. You need a real product as if it was going to your consumer's hands to evaluate the quality of the product. The next global risk issue is pipeline inventory. Pipeline inventory issues will always occur when a third party, the shipper, is involved. The problems begin pronounced when offshore sourcing is used. Consequently, pipeline inventory problems can sometimes be next to impossible to resolve. It is almost impossible to put specific costs on problems associated with pipeline inventory. The pipeline inventory costs are truly a hidden cost that must be considered when evaluating offshore accounts. Pipeline inventory basically at the end of the day also means that your supplier is not just doing business for you. They're working with multiple buying firms or multiple companies, so you don't always know where you stand in their production line. You may have an agreement to a due date for the shipment, but it doesn't mean that they're always going to be on time and, for example, could be delayed if they have another emergency or are backed up in the pipeline of their product or production of other people's products. The other global risk issue is staffing. If a buying firm is to be effective with an offshore sourcing strategy, it must either hire experts or develop specialists that are assigned to offshore suppliers. Ideally, these individuals must have experience in purchasing management, quality control, and basic accounting. Again, it's very important to have qualified individuals who understand all the dynamics of buying, understanding how to negotiate, understanding how to look at the supplier and evaluate their production and operation. Can they justify that they will be able to adhere to the quality standards of the products? Will this buying staff also ensure that they are able to find a global sourcing partner that can ship on time and basically handle all of the aspects of what a normal distribution center could do if it was domestic? Also, this cost must be considered in the evaluation process. So your resources, even at the buying staff, need to be evaluated. You need to understand the total cost of doing business. That both goes to your outsourcing and also your domestic buying staff. Number 7 there says the impact of increased competition. The above direct and indirect costs tend to add unexpected costs to purchased items. However, the significant benefits associated with offshore sourcing enables the buying team to gain leverage over the domestic suppliers. Domestic firms are well aware that some firms are considering offshore firms in their long-term strategies. What this means is that you're going to end up at the end of the day, if you are someone who has an effective relationship with your supplier overseas, if you get your products on time, if they ship on time at the quality that you have established with your foreign partner, the products are going to arrive on time with the quality you expect, and if at a lower cost than your competition, at a better price for your customers, which in return means more sales. If all the back-end production, all the back-end sourcing, and operational elements line up fairly and in the way you want it as a business or a buying organization, you're going to get your products better, faster, cheaper, and to market, and able to sell it at a price that drives demand, drives sales, and at the end of the day, bottom line profitability. So those were issues that we, kind of established in general with global sourcing, but there was a great article that I thought I'd share with you from industryweek.com. Now, it came out in 2015, but it's still very relevant. This is an outlook of what global sourcing looks like, or international procurement, through the year 2025. There are 10 issues they wanted us to talk about. The first one was risk. By 2025, procurement risk management will undergo a major shift, moving away from emphasizing compliance to adopting a more holistic strategy that includes total risk exposure, risk mitigation investments, and risk transfer pricing. To enable this transition, procurement leaders need to develop category managers who can develop next generation approaches to supplier risk management and factor new metrics into major sourcing and supplier management decisions. What this means is that KPIs are the metrics that at one point or another companies, several years ago may have said were the measurements of success. The metrics that we, drive our business on may need to shift. That there needs to be with the risk of, increased amount of competition, with the amount of risk that's going on out there in global sourcing, there needs to be a way to minimize that risk and have risk management. Risk management is a whole course you can take in a lot of business schools or something that you can get trained on the job. You have to understand how to minimize risk, but also if there is risk involved, how to work through that risk at any point in time. The second issue facing international procurement is, believe it or not, sustainability. Procurement functions will move beyond managing costs and seek to develop supply chains that create a more sustained economic and social value. So this isn't always, when I say risk, it's not always going to be a detriment to international sourcing. It's more of a pivot or change in direction that global sourcing needs to take. Now, at its core, global sourcing, like I've talked about in this entire lecture, is all about cost control. It's all about the best price or best cost for your raw material or goods or resources to save money for a company. But with the fact that many organizations in the last several years and going forward are all talking about being environmentally and socially friendly, the shift in the back-end supply chain needs to also pivot in their focus on that as well to adhere to the overall mission of the company. As many companies are looking to be sustainable, give back to the environment, give back to its people, the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. That's when it comes to supply chain to find not just the most cost-effective raw materials and supply chain labor, but it's also making sure the suppliers they work with have environmentally friendly products or have some type of sustainable effort on their own, while also treating their people good as well. Because if let's say for example, United States company wants to do a global outsourcing of production with a supplier overseas, they're going to want to make sure that that supplier overseas is treating their employees well, that they are having, they have good policies for their employees, just as if they were their own in the United States, and that there's also sustainability when it comes to their product. And at the end of the day, profitability is an equal shared measurement of success. The next emerging issue for globalization within international procurement is globalization. As the emerging markets assume a greater role in the global economy, the traditional demand and supply roles that have shaped global commerce over the last 50 years will change dramatically. By 2025, global companies will have procurement managers based in China to source materials and services not only for the operations in that country, but for the entire organization. In the Americas, Brazil will become a major source of both demand and supply for global companies. To handle this task capably, procurement teams need to start developing expertise in local emerging market sourcing in China, Brazil, Russia, and India, as well as other developing economies. What this means is that you can't just sit in your own host country anymore that you live in and assume that you can do all of the global sourcing from right there. You need to get out, you need to regionalize yourself across the world and find ways to do business and work with the large competitive countries such as China, Brazil, Russia, and India. Because businesses are becoming more global, so is the need for global sourcing to become more broad in scope. The scales of economy are increasing in a lot of countries, so it's up to the supply chain gurus and supply chain managers of the world to ensure that their globalization efforts are also in key with the business side of the house. As we continue to look towards 2025, the next issue is integration. By virtue of its position within the organization, procurement teams should always be aware, or should be, of all supplier and market information flowing into the enterprise and for demand and product data flowing out to collaboration partners. So it's that security of information with the fact that, there's more access to data breaches and to hackers getting into the information of a company. Well, if your information is being shared with a foreign business partner, you want to make sure that information is secure, and the integration between companies, if there is one that has very secure measures to protect the trade secrets and intellectual property of your company. The next big topic is finance. In the future, procurement managers will need to broaden their skill sets to help their organizations adapt to the complex changes of managing the global supply base. Many will need to develop financial acumen that rivals those of their finance counterparts. Leading companies should start taking steps to tighten the relationship between finance and procurement and to enhance the financial skills of their procurement teams. A lot of procurement teams run in a very siloed approach. They work in their group and don't really converse with finance all that much. They just believe that they take the information that they get from their suppliers on the cost of the material, and then they just hand it over to finance to include into the entire finance budget and plan. True, sourcing is only one variable cost, one variable measurement of the entire financial plan that a finance manager or a finance team needs to oversee. However, it is up to the procurement team to establish a better business relationship with the finance team to discuss all of the international components that they're seeing out there in the market today, or the foreign market. That can help finance adjust, pivot, or reanalyze some of the other areas of the company or business to make sure that there's enough financial capital available to invest into the new ways of which sourcing and procurement is taking place. The next risk going through 2025 is innovation. By 2025, the leading procurement organizations will serve as a primary channel for finding new ways to create value from the global supply base, whether by streamlining new product development or outsourcing non-core functions. As a way to move this evolution forward, procurement organizations need to gain a better understanding of the role outside entities play in driving innovation in their industries. To support this, many procurement teams will need to expand their expertise in engineering, design, and new product development. There's a good part of the last several years before this article was written, probably in the late 1900s, early 2000s, where the core job of sourcing was to take the current product that was developed by others, by the product managers or the innovation teams, and all their job was to do was go take those widgets, those materials, and go find the best cost. That's all they were really assigned to do. Now it's up to sourcing to be a part of that product development and innovation team. They need to have a seat at the table. The reason why is because they can voice what they're seeing in the market. They could perhaps enhance or even really pivot the direction a product development or innovation team is taking on a product because of the fact they know some information about the material or supplier base that can really help or augment the decisions being made with the product development team. And at the end of the day, they all need to work towards the same goals in establishing innovation and product development to be competitive in today's very complex and global business environment. There are four more issues that were posed in the Industry Week article that are very important to understand as we kind of look forward into the future, in the near future, in the next several years into 2025. The next risk is collaboration. In the future, leading procurement organizations will deploy external collaboration models far removed from traditional buy and audit models. Procurement professionals will need to orchestrate complex outsourcing and service management arrangements with multiple vendors. Starting now, procurement organizations need to begin moving toward establishing collaborative outsourcing and service acquisition models to replace adversarial constructs that encourage zero-sum or win-lose scenarios. Collaboration is key in all business relationships. especially in global sourcing today, where there's an opportunity to do multiple business ventures with the same supplier or company that you're sourcing from. They can help you establish one product line or multiple at any given point. But also, manufacturers and suppliers today overseas are also more equipped to do more, not just crank out the same product, but they can, evolve into offering different services. So it's that collaboration. It's that finding new business opportunity. That's even more, business development is really key with your sourcing partners. Transparency, number one issue today that you can see in some areas is social media can be a risk for companies. If there's one quality control problem with a product or enough of complaints taking place out there, social media is going to be the place where people go to complain about a product, and therefore it's going to establish an issue with the company and their reputation, and the company in question is going to have an issue with their supplier overseas and ask them why the quality wasn't done the way they were told to do it, or some type of issue of not getting the product to, or the demand for the that's out there for the product. The supply didn't make it on time. All those issues kind of go to the back end of supply chain operations, and while the face of the company has to answer to it, that's the social media account and the people behind the social media account. It's the business relationship with our international partners that they have to answer to that. So that transparency factor is very important. Companies nowadays need to be more transparent than ever with each other, especially in business relationships internationally. The sourcing team needs to be able to understand from the supplier base or manufacturer if there's going to be an issue with the quality or if there's an issue with the shipment. So therefore, they can, hopefully find preventative measures before the product goes to market to eliminate any of these issues that happen today. So transparency is very important. The next issue we talked about before is information. Big data is out there. It's shared, easily on the internet. There are many different means of exchanges of files, but the protection of that data is very important. It's also very important that technology for any procurement team is up to date. It can handle large amounts of data because as the volume of products increase, so does the amount of data transfer and information to get products ordered, the materials ordered, and shipped on time. And the final thing to focus on is the people. The preceding 9 dimensions that were just talked about, or 9 issues, make the case for an extremely different procurement function within the next 10 years or so. Even if only half of these predictions fully emerge, the procurement leaders of tomorrow will have to adopt a different worldview than their counterparts in the past. Again, the procurement leaders are the future professionals who do global sourcing and procurement, must look at the business differently, understand the core elements of what it means to source globally and procure, but understand that things are changing in the global business environment and there are new ways to look at the business from a global sourcing perspective. So again, these are just 10 predictions, 10 outlooks, and 10 very, thoughtful insights of what it means to look forward into the near future of what global sourcing means today and in the near future. Thank you so much for your time in reviewing this lecture tonight. I hope you learned a lot, and I will talk to you soon.